Hello, I'm Tom Ferguson and welcome to The Fundamental Molecule. This show explores the intersection of water, technology, and entrepreneurship. Each week, I interview innovators, experts, entrepreneurs, and investors in the world of water, helping us understand where this trillion-dollar industry is headed. These are the stories of the people building the future of the world's most valuable and fundamental resource.
Disclaimer. Tom Ferguson is the managing partner of Virgin Island Ventures. All opinions expressed by Tom and podcast guests are solely their own opinions and do not reflect the opinions of Virgin Island Ventures. This podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be viewed as investment advice or relied upon as a basis for investment decisions.
When you hear a canary singing in the coal mine, you should stop and listen. Without torturing the metaphor too far, this is how I felt when I started working with Megan Glover at 120 Water in 2017 as she started to build her business. The success of her business is predicated on the talent of the people running it. And Megan was important because she was one of the first brilliant CEOs who was truly new to water. She is at the vanguard of exceptionally smart, driven company leaders who appeared at the end of the 2010s and were the predicate, essentially, of BIV coming into being. We don't get to do our job without enough people as good as Megan. I love this conversation, covering everything from strategic marketing to advice to board members. Please enjoy my conversation with my friend, Megan Glover. Megan, this has been a long time in coming. How are you?
I am wonderful. How are you, Tom?
I'm really well, and I'm very excited about this. Every time I sort of speak to somebody from the old days of kind of Imagine H2O and all of those programs, I just thought about Ahmad Gavkar, who was our winner in 16, and you were our winner in 18, and the winner in 17 now runs our 401k at Carbon Collective. Anyway, it's like this extraordinary thing. So we've known each other for ages now, and I feel enormously privileged.
Yes, likewise. Long time coming, and those were simpler and very fond times, Tom.
Yeah, exactly. Simpler and heady days before the crushing weight of reality bears down upon us. Anyway. No, well, I don't know what you're talking about. You've gone from glory to glory, essentially uninterrupted. So I'm going to start us up. I'm not going to take you back to a specific point in time. I'm going to point you to a specific skill set that you have that not everybody has when they come in. It's usually something they have to learn kicking and screaming, which is that you had a pretty hefty marketing career before founding 120 Water. So when you think about marketing in the context of 120's trajectory, what role do you think it has played, and what do you think makes marketing so important? How was that background useful for you as an entrepreneur?
You know, I think that go-to-market background is kind of underrated, quite frankly, with the CEO spectrum. You know, because prior to founding 120 Water, I was in charge of go-to-market, which is marketing and sales for B2B software as a service companies, primarily venture-backed or private equity-backed. And I think what's interesting about that background is you learn, it's very analytical in that you learn how to map a market. So understanding the market dynamics, very simple things from what is your addressable market to what's the ICP, which is your ideal customer profile, to what's that competitive landscape, what segments within that competitive landscape are growing versus others. So you learn that analytical side, I think, about how to understand a market and the dynamics within a market, but then you get to marry it with the creative side, which I just felt very privileged to do, which is then you take that to developing your personas and the messaging and the brand that ultimately drives the campaigns that are going to get that value proposition that you're trying to commercialize in the customer's hands. So it's that commercialization, that building demand, and then marrying that kind of creative side of marketing that I think was completely invaluable to me starting a company in water and allowed me to really wrap my arms around the industry that I don't think I'd be able to do if I didn't have that background and know how to kind of do that.
It was so obvious that it was going to be such a useful differentiation, like right from the very beginning, kind of regardless of the vertical that you had chosen, you just immediately spoke this language in a way that we'd very rarely seen before. And it's obviously served you extremely well. I want to come to the second part of it, I always forget which brain is which. It's actually really embarrassing, like whatever. So like the artistic side of the brain is going to take a back seat, the live insight into Tom's head here for a second. But starting with this idea that I think is much more misunderstood by founders is that marketing is not just like, oh, I wonder what our website's going to look like and what kind of video that we can put on LinkedIn. Can you just walk us through kind of the importance of the kind of quantitative aspect of it? And if you were to have any advice for founders as to when you should bring in that, what is commonly termed strategic marketing kind of into play, what were your insights around it, and how would you advise others to kind of cross the bridges that you did?
I think, before you even think about the creative, you have to know who the creative is for. I've taken this approach, ever since I started in marketing, is that your assets are just an extension of your sellers, an extension of your brand. And so before you can even put pen to paper, whether that's your first piece of collateral or website, you have to do the heavy lifting, which is a lot of market research and voice of customer. And in understanding, who am I building this for? What do I want them to do when they reach that asset? And each asset has its time and place, so there's a whole methodology around the content marketing funnel, and going from awareness to opportunity to, what I'm talking about, Tom. And so, what I did in kind of starting in this water industry is I just talked to a lot of people that I had no business talking to in 2016. I mean, literally, I remember talking to the CEO of Denver Water, who had no time for me, but we had a connection and I was able to, and you just talk to a lot of people and say, how crazy is this idea? For every no, you get a yes, for every yes, you get a no. And hopefully the data shows that you have enough kind of trend in that to start a company or pursue your idea. But then you use that to build out your content and your hierarchy, and then all of the assets that kind of flow through that. So in my opinion, I think that strategic piece of marketing is the most important fundamental thing you could do as a business, because if you do it right, it'll have like this cascading effect that you can use over and over again throughout the lifetime of your business and as you evolve.
Absolutely. You're literally aiming the engine that you are choosing to build.
Yes.
So you've sort of taken us to the genesis, and I want to come back to a couple of the things that you've mentioned, but we can do that in just a little bit. To take us back to the start of 120 Water, because you were almost your own first persona, which is very useful.
Yes, I was.
For people to have that advantage, right? Building a problem that you were experiencing yourself. But just walk us through kind of the genesis of it. Where did this come from? What did you decide to build?
Not what we built, not what we have today.
Well, ain't that always the case?
Give it all pivots, right?
Absolutely.
Tommy, you're right. I mean, I tried to solve my own consumer problem. This was early in 2016. It was the height of the Flint, Michigan water crisis. And we've all slept a lot. And I can't believe it's been years. Oh my gosh.
Mm-hmm.
But at that time, I'm in Indiana. Michigan is just a state away. And it was just all consuming on the news. My kids went to daycare during the day. I wanted to make sure that the water was clean there as well as at home for cooking and drinking. And I called my water company and I couldn't get my water tested. And no fault to them. It's just they didn't offer that service. And so they referred me to a lab. It was very commercial. It was like, we don't really do walk-in testing, but if you'd like to bring in a sample, we can do a full-blown panel and that'll be about $1,000. I'm like, well, that's not accessible for me. And I really want to know, can I, make mac and cheese with this water that I'm drinking? I went to a business partner of mine that I'd been in a couple startups with, and we just kind of got on the subject and said, I can go and get my DNA tested or genetics tested at the time through like 23. Why can't we get our water tested? Long story short, we reverse engineered that process and kind of brought this laboratory to consumer testing to market within a couple of months, and really thought that was going to just kind of be a nice side project that needed to exist in the world. And what I found out is water found me at that point. I got very passionate about the industry at that point, just learning the ins and out about the industry, how it's regulated, who regulates it. And I'm sure we can get into the pivot in a bit, but it was kind of during that process that I just really found a passion being in the industry.
It tends to do that once it gets its teeth into you, it very rarely kind of lets go in the nicest possible way. A lot of it's to do with people. Everyone's lovely. So what you built first was this interface for customers to be able to go and do the thing that you were not able to do. But just talk us through the genesis of the product and sort of interrelate it with the lessons that you were taught from kind of the outside world. Let's go up to the point of the pivot. And then I'm just always really interested in this, in the best founders, how they incorporate the feedback loops as they experience them.
We built this very robust way to get the lab and backed by a whole logistics engine to get the kits from the warehouse to the consumer to the lab, and then electronically service real-time data about the logistics of those kits and results of those kits, communicate results within days, not weeks. So we knew we built this robust process. And in the process of setting up the business, I had all of my common listening signals that I had set up for my watchdog. I had Google alerts. I was in tune with all of the industry pubs. Every single morning, I'd get in and analyze all this stuff. And every single day, it was like, so-and-so municipality now testing for lead because they'd hit an action level. Or again, it was just kind of every single day, it just seems more testing at the tap. And a lot of these municipalities were the ones having to do it. And so we literally had no money left in the bank. We had $5,000. I had a guy who still works for me. His name is John Garrison. And I said, hey, John, we need to go prototype kind of a piece of software to make this more municipal focused for these programs. And I said, we're going to take our money and we're going to go to one conference. And if we land a couple contracts, I'm going to go raise some money and we're going to see if we can go replicate this. Sure enough, through our networking, kind of through my voice of customer and talking to people, I was able to get connected to Pittsburgh Water and Sewer Authority. And we went to this conference and we closed 2 contracts. So within a matter of, a month, we had booked a couple $100,000 in revenue. And that was enough for me to say, I'm going to quit my day job and we're going to focus on this because, there's something here. And the next month we closed a $2 million contract with the state of Indiana to basically provide the software to do all of their lead testing around their schools and daycares based on that prototype that we developed. So it was just kind of listening to the market, saying, hey, this consumer thing is interesting, but it seems like the demand might be over here. Let's try to put ourselves in a position to test that out. And those hypotheses actually came to fruition.
Absolutely fantastic. So once you've moved across to servicing the large munis, can you talk to us about the kind of the components of the marketing that are kind of required? I mean, people will spend a lot of time talking about reference cases, and I think you did a really good job of establishing those to become the trusted partner for these kinds of programs within the US. And it really feels like that was a key component of the flywheel. Firstly, is that the case? And then secondly, any reflections on that process?
I mean, that's where the pivot to the muni, that's where kind of my B2B background kind of really kicked in, because that's what you do in B2B marketing is you put the customer front and center and you rely heavily on use case and case studies. So, I mean, Tom, the first answer to your question is don't F up.
Yeah, exactly.
Like,
do well.
Do it well. So before we could even use our early adopters as use cases, like we knew a lot was on the line to go and just like execute really well. And so we worked really, really hard to prove that we belonged in water. And that's something I'm super proud of. I think to this day is, we had to prove a lot that we deserved to be at the table. And I think our execution, our delivery did that. And then our customers kept giving us more programs. So, we started very pointed at Pittsburgh, just taking on their consumer request program. And within a year, we had all of their kit program related to their lead program. So again, we kept proving ourselves and getting more work. And then finally, about, I would say, 6 to 8 months into those contracts, we felt comfortable enough to go and kind of make that official pivot and start marketing directly to those folks.
It's such a sensible route. So it's kind of an interesting time for us because, and of all the things that happened between kind of 2016 to 2020, one of the big ones was that actually the lead and copper rule was strengthened or literally brought into existence by the APA that you would probably not expect to have brought us into existence. But nevertheless, it gives you kind of a really interesting, substrate for the business. How do you think about, and I don't know whether this is generalizable, but how do you think about regulatory drivers like the lead and copper rule and making sure that they are a tailwind and a cherry on top versus the actual kind of predicate of what's going on? I'm really thinking now about the PFAS side of things because you came into being when like lead was front and center and everything was going on and you caught that wave brilliantly and you've now become this sort of extraordinary force for good in terms of the municipalities. But as you look at the other areas of kind of emerging contaminants, how do you think about the interplay between them and regulation and any opportunities for you?
One of the things we heard very early on, again, by talking to the customers, talking to the market, lead is just one of many things that our customers are doing in day out. And honestly, Tom, it may not be the most important thing that they're doing, depending on geographically and the concerns happening at the utility. But one thing we knew as a business in this antiquated industry is the number one driver for change is a regulatory demand. And so we knew very early on that if we wanted to accomplish kind of our mission, we would need to be the market leader in this new regulatory rule of the lead and copper. So we really leaned into that as the beachhead, to use a startup term, as a kind of a platform to hopefully do other things now and into the future. So I think for us, it's a lot easier to do new things than try to unseat legacy competitors in other kind of areas within water. And so I think it's for an entrepreneur, it's a lot easier to lean into things that have never existed before than try to convince an industry that is resistant against change to do things differently. We were just opportunistic in that, taking advantage of that environment at that time.
You said the change in regulatory demands. I mean, you've been really good because the timing was good. Sometimes the change in regulatory demand takes longer than you would think. And then it goes back to that other old startup adage, which is being early is the same as being wrong, which you've done a really good job of avoiding. Have you given yourself any time to think about where you think regulation is going to go in other emerging contaminants? I mean, I've mentioned PFAS, but people are starting to see bioaccumulation of microplastics in hearts and brains. And we know that the EU is going to definitely sharpen the pencils if they've not already sharpened the pencils on all of that. Do you see them coming down the pipe? Do you think that this is going to be a movement in the market anytime soon?
It is February 11th. I think we need to put our head in the sand and come up in a month or so and see what's happening in Washington. I think
ostrich time.
There's just a lot of movement right now. And until things really come to a pencils down point, we're not expecting PFAS and lead to go away. I think we're waiting for potential changes, at least in the US, to those drinking water regulations. I would expect very limited to zero movement on other types of federal regulations over the next 4 years. But I think this is an opportunity for states to get involved. And I do think we will see states kind of carry the torch as it pertains to drinking water and wastewater regulations, where maybe the federal government over the next handful of years.
Absolutely, which is an extraordinarily good segue. I was just talking to a founder this morning, was slightly encouraging him, which I very rarely do, to look, you kind of have the length of time now where you can actually change the playing field of your markets. Like, you need to go and speak to a public affairs person about what you can do to invest in, the direction of rulemaking, because it's all positive, right? This is all good for the world.
Absolutely.
But you can influence rulemaking. Like, how did you think about doing that? And what have you seen effective? What, if you were to do it again, what would you do differently, if anything? And do you think it's a worthwhile point of investment for founders?
Gosh, I think if it's a worthwhile investment, if it has direct implications to your business model, either positive or negative, to lobby for the sake of lobbying, you might as well just go be a lobbyist, but we have done it successfully at the state level. And we've done it successfully when we can use our data or expertise for good, because a lot of times, what we find is lobbying is just education on the facts. Either there's something written in the proposed regulation that doesn't make sense, that's not really practical, and then you can provide data or examples of good to maybe help frame how that legislation is written. Otherwise, it's defending funding that may be on the chopping block because the legislative body doesn't understand the good that funding is doing and how it's saving lives and so on and so forth. So we've done it successfully at the state level. At the federal level, we've not done it directly because it's very hard to impact anything there. But what we have done is tried to be a part of our associations and those government affairs committees so we can be part of the conversation when we need to be and provide data and provide examples of good and kind of use our associations and their government affairs teams as the conduits.
Absolutely. It's also not just the regulators, right, that are providing the tailwinds, especially for, you're more now on the municipal side of things and ensuring that they have the ability to do compliance work that they need to. But another part of this that I think people, and obviously future entrepreneurs, need to take into account is that I often feel like people have a very optimistic view of who kind of humans are. And I'm curious as to what you've learned about who kind of humans are. Because we all should want to know how much we pay for water and get our water tested to understand exactly what's in it. But not everybody does. Kind of the influence of kind of inertia, and therefore the size of these kind of potential markets are really at the whims of how many people like me or you or whoever are going to say right, it's time for my annual sample of my water to make sure that nothing has changed. And then I'm going to tune the thing under the sink to make sure that it's as robust as it can be. Does it surprise you how few people take action in light of how important water quality is for health and happiness of the family? Or am I on the wrong side of it? You see loads of people doing it all the time.
Absolutely, Tom. When we launched, again, we started in B2C, and to this day, it shocks me how much engagement our marketing and social marketing received with zero conversion.
Right.
It was very clear that people were concerned, but they weren't willing to swipe their credit card to actually know the ins and out of the problem. So yes, I think maybe it's because we're not to the point where the price is accessible for all. I don't know, but I mean, it shocks me the amount of folks that are willing to talk about water quality, raise their hands, and so on and so forth. But I think when it comes to actually paying for the solution, I don't think we're quite there yet in terms of that.
It's so interesting. Just the popped in my mind, how do you assess the business model of the labs and the role of the labs? Now, it can be beyond kind of what you're doing, but sort of more, because it's a player in the water market that I've been fascinated with forever, and you know them better than most. It's kind of an amazing business, but maybe slightly flawed compared to the needs of the water market. Like, how do you reflect on this sort of monolith that sits at the heart of the water sector?
The lab market in of itself is a market that's moving. I mean, you have big players, private equity is getting into the space.
Yes.
So what you're seeing is a lot of consolidation. And then what we're seeing is that actually provides opportunity to companies like 120 Water, because what happens when you consolidate all of these labs is they're consolidating at a rate where all of their systems are not talking to one another and they're not operating as one cohesive unit. So what actually we end up doing is providing a kind of a normalization layer on top of this antiquated market, for lack of a better word, to provide laboratory testing, normalized laboratory testing across the US. So our customers don't know that we're sending and rerouting samples all across the US. All that they know is they're getting their lead samples taken on time or their PFAS sample analyzed at an affordable rate. So we can kind of come over the top of all of the laboratory systems, normalize the data, figure out the logistics, and the lab gets their share, we get our share. And we believe actually that's going to be the future moving forward, because the EPA is not going to get rid of mandating and all of their methods, if you will. So I see this as a market that's probably going to continue to evolve for us, and we're betting on that.
But this is the layer, to make sure that as it functions as well as possible. It's a smart place to be.
As well as possible.
Yeah, exactly. The picks and the shovels. To take it back to you, as you sort of reflect, you've done such a good job of taking us from where you started through to the pivot to where you are now and all the various things. How do you see your role has changed? You obviously got bigger, and the old adage is that you just put yourself sequentially out of a series of jobs until you're left with potentially 3, but you may be still left with more than those. How do you reflect on it? How has that evolution kind of occurred, and where does it leave you now as one of the more mature entities on a startup timeline in water?
I'm still figuring out what I'm going to be when I grow up, Tom. I don't think as an entrepreneur. I think I've at least had 4 very big jobs, as CEO of 120 Water, from entrepreneur, is this going to work? Tears, in the bedroom because, you can't go out in public crying and be like, what have I done? To seed stage where, oh my gosh, I think I've done something, to Series A, and now to growth equity. And so every stage for me, I've had to kind of step back and say, am I the right leader for this next stage? Do I feel like I have the skills to be able to lead through this next stage? And so far, I felt like I have, and I'm very much enjoying kind of this growth equity phase and kind of figuring out where 120 is ultimately going to kind of end up and put their stake in the ground. But it definitely has been a moment of reflection every time. And you have to step back and say, okay, am I the person? And if so, what's the team around me that we're going to need to assemble in order to get to that next phase? Because the team changes too. And that's kind of been a point of reflection every time you go through those different phases.
Yes, of course. It's a series of phase changes for sure. If you see where you are now, what's your biggest surprise, I guess, about the thing that takes up the most brain space relative to what you thought it would?
Right now, I do a lot of consensus building. We're at a very transformational stage, and that we're trying to build consensus and make some bets, some of which have some price tags on them about where we need to go in the future. And a lot of that is making sure my board is educated on the market. They're educated on why we think we're making the bets that we're making, backing that up with data, backing that up with conviction. And it's almost like, I'm spending a lot of my time getting folks bought into like that next, it's almost like startup all over again, right? You're getting them ready to kind of buy into the idea.
It makes a lot of sense because which each new stage is like parenting. Just as you've got used to one stage, it changes on you. What?
What?
What do you mean after you learn something new? This is absurd.
Yeah.
Do you have any advice for startup board members? You know, we're on the board. We counted it yesterday. We're on the board of 15 companies. And I think it's one of those things that I kind of wish that there was more the other way feedback for board members as to how to do it most effectively. Now, obviously people have written, a reasonable amount on it, but you very rarely hear founders being asked if you had any advice for people that would make your board members better. What would it be?
I think on the start, it's getting that alignment before they become board members is just so important. I think, when you're trying to just work on closing the deal and everyone kind of thinks the funding's like the finish line, the funding's just the beginning. If you don't have the alignment at the jump, the funding's not going to be successful. And even down to like the P&L. I don't think I took appreciation for having that honest conversation about burn and what is the runway that, again,
we're working towards. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So naive. I'm just like, let's get the money in, but we need to be talking about what we're going to do with the money and be very explicit about it and aligned on a plan before we even take that check.
Yeah, because I think it happens all the time that people sort of wander onto a board level role and just sort of assume that what's happening inside your own head, and this is from the point of view of an investor, right? What's happening inside your own head is exactly what's happening on the other side, but you've just got to be so explicit about it.
Yeah, explicit.
By the way, couldn't agree with you more about funding is not the finish line. Not only do I think should not celebrate headcount milestones, quote unquote, but I actually don't think you should celebrate fundraising. Like celebrate revenue milestones. How about?
Exactly. Yes.
How about that? Now, you've been one of the best team builders that we've seen. You've hired some extraordinary people who, some of whom are still with you and others are doing amazing things in other water companies in and around the place. How do you think the talent market within water has changed over time? Because I think you've also done something really, really helpful, was that you've converted, I think, probably the most amount of people from outside water into water people, which is an enormous and undersung service that we all thank you for. But how has the talent pool evolved?
I'm very proud of that. Even the folks
you should be
that are no longer with 120 have stayed in water. And that's something that I hope stays that way. And even anytime someone's leaving, I want them to stay in water and I want to find them opportunities in water because we need more diverse thought in water, in my opinion. But I think we could place more talent in water, but we need more entrepreneurs in water and we need more entrepreneurs that don't come from water because I think we could do a whole heck of a lot more. I mean, I have folks reaching out to me, talent, all the time, and I don't have room for them. And they're not really, nor should they go to corporate water. So I think there's opportunity for great talent to join water. We just need to do more to open up more companies in water.
You're seeing hopefully the same thing that we are, which is that, wow, this person has got sort of extraordinary pedigree and has shown up.
I think people are done just kind of making money for the sake of making money for other people, right? If you're going to join something for profit, do it profit for good, if that makes sense. And I think water does that. It's so rewarding and it gets you. And I think, again, we've just been fortunate to hire probably the most talented folks I've ever worked with. And I think we're going to continue to do that. We've just been very lucky, I think, in who we've been able to attract and bring into water.
Well, it's like the old Gary Player thing, isn't it? It's like the more I practice, the luckier I get.
Yeah.
The other thing is that you are the canary in the coal mine of that for me. I remember when you turned up in whatever it was, early 2017, and I was like,
2017.
Mid 2017. I was like, people like this are turning up to start water businesses. That is very interesting. That if we can get this caliber of person. So you started with your vision for 120 and we've been through the updates. We've been through the updates here. What do you think the next kind of, just call it a 5-year time frame. What do you think this looks like? Because you also referred to, like, you worked on both the VC and the PE side of it. Mm-hmm. And you've been through Series A, right founder, then seed, Series A. You're now on the growth equity side of it. So you're kind of treading the path that you'd worked on both sides of the table. You're moving from one side of the table to the other. But I'm curious how the vision has changed or updated, and what do you communicate to the team as to the job that is there to be done now?
So we just did our sales kickoff a couple of weeks ago. And I genuinely feel this, like, in some ways, I feel like our job is just now getting started, Tom. I think our goal has always been to build a durable business in water. And again, back to where we've focused our time, it's really been, let's do that and take advantage of the regulatory landscape and lead. But we've always believed that there needs to be a more modern operating system in water. And lead is just one program of many that needs to exist for our customers, to run their programs. So that's kind of the next kind of leg of the journey that we're on. And we're exploring all avenues to do that, whether that's build, buy, and partner. And that's kind of what we're executing over the next leg of the journey.
So what does selling to utilities look like for you? How do you characterize it? And what advice would you have for people getting into it? I know you're slightly distinct because you're selling really a kind of an entire platform.
That is a loaded question, Tom.
No. And I don't expect it to be, look, everything's slow and it's a nightmare. Like, we know that the sales cycles are long. Of course they are.
Yes, they are. Yeah.
But the magic is in managing,
And
right?
yes.
And so that the ending of the sales cycle is in a cadence that allows you to build a business relatively predictably, despite the length of the sales cycles. But
Yeah.
you've just been at the face for a while. So I'm just curious as you're bringing on the salespeople, what is it that you're trying to inculcate in them? What is it that you've learned about the process?
Well, I think let's start the business. I mean, manage your cash because it's going to take in water. They always say twice as long as a startup. Multiply that by 2 or 3 in water, right?
Yeah, the expectations are super important.
I mean, to make sure you have enough cash or resources to, kind of withstand that first proof of concept to get you to the flywheel. But you have to understand the buying cycle of the utilities. And that's obviously different depending on whether you're going to the larger utilities and the IOUs versus downward. So if you don't understand the procurement cycles and how you're able to get in, and, I think a lot of entrepreneurs kind of get confused between pilots and product market fit. If you don't have a pilot to procure, then you don't really have something to replicate. And I think it could be kind of a false positive that what you have can be replicated. So we've been very, very deliberate about understanding like path to procurement. How can we kind of circumvent procurement and kind of shore up sales cycles when we know there's an interest to buy and have success there. So, and again, I think it's a lot of stuff that I kind of put in my toolkit that I'm happy to share with other entrepreneurs now to kind of show them how we've mapped the market and kind of procurement cycles and where we've had success, because I think that is such an important lever to getting your product actually commercialized in this space, is just understanding that piece.
I'm sure you're going to get a deluge of emails after this saying, hey, couldn't you share the playbook, please? You've also done really good work in partnerships in this. Is there anything you want to say around that side of things?
Yep. So we've had very good partnerships and very awful partnerships.
Oh.
And I think...
And we all, Megan.
And I say that affectionately. I don't think any company, like every partnership is a slam dunk. And so all I will say there is win fast and fail fast. So we've experimented a lot with partnerships and we've gotten better about guardrails. If it sounds too good to be true, it's probably going to be too good to be true, and don't single thread that. So we've had very good luck with association partnership. I think as the company matures and the product matures, distribution partnerships. And I think the last partnership that we'll probably explore is kind of corporate partnerships, learning the hard way. But yes, I think partnerships can be a phenomenal tool for technologies to get out there, but just making sure you give yourself enough runway and padding to experiment in a lot of different areas.
Absolutely. I don't know why this just occurred to me, but I'm going to ask it anyway. Not all of the things that just occurred to me are a good idea. But do you have any advice for founders on the practice of negotiation?
In the practice of negotiation. It's funny, I'm still learning the art of negotiation.
I think everybody is for life.
Especially negotiating with the state attorney general right now in my inbox.
Right.
Here you get insurance.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I mean, yeah, that's a great one, Tom. And maybe that's one that I should kind of think a little bit about what's worked. But
we can ask you next time you come on. It's something that I think about a lot because the practice of it, usually obviously what they say is that like, you got to be there to anchor and you got to understand your best alternative to no agreement and all the rest of it. But I just think you may not give yourself credit for this, but I think one of your real strengths is the fact that you are extremely personable and you're extremely reasonable.
Yes.
I think that from what I know of the structures that you've been able to put in place, they've been fantastic. So you're clearly extremely effective at it. But episode 2 with Megan.
I will say, I think we've been effective because we've been very confident about what we can deliver. And so we've earned the right to negotiate. Our early contracts were not favorable.
Yeah.
But I think as we've proven our technology and our team, we've kind of earned the right to negotiate more because, we have a good track record to push back on.
It's such an important one, is that so many people sort of end up trying to put the cart before the horse. And actually the solution to pretty much everything is to just build an awesome product that solves a very serious pain point for people and provides a value proposition in response to that pain point, and everything else flows from there. Megan, it really is. It's always such a pleasure to see you. It's been amazing to watch you work for the last 8 years with sort of increasing levels of disbelief at the acumen and the fact that you do just adapt to each of the different stages that you move on to. And I can't wait to see what the next few years hold. But we've come to our final question, which is, if you had to choose one piece of advice from your extraordinary journey for current and future water entrepreneurs, what would that piece of advice be?
Take the risk. My guess is somewhere out there, someone has an idea in water and they don't know where to start, or they're like, I don't know anything about water, or I don't even know if it's a good idea. But take the risk, because the water industry is here to support you and wrap their arms around you. Tom, you're there. I'm sure you would raise your hand. I would raise your hand.
Absolutely. Hugs for everyone.
Just take the risk. It's freaking scary, but this industry has probably been one of the most rewarding industries that I'll ever be a part of. And we're just getting started. So I just take the risk. You won't be disappointed.
I think that's a great one. I can't remember who said this. And I think that, well, maybe we can find it in the show notes. It's that saying about loads of people spend a lot of time looking at the door and then finally they work up the courage to try the handle and they find that it's open.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the door is open. And to your point, if someone's hearing this, thinking about water or an idea, I think that there's a lot of opportunity and innovation is welcome here.
Absolutely. Goethe and the hands that come to your aid. For sure. Megan, that's a really wonderful place to finish. Thank you so much for being here. Congratulations on all that you've achieved. You've been a huge inspiration over the almost decade that we've known each other. It's been insane. Thank you, and I can't wait for the next time.
Thank you, Tom. Great to be with you.